stories from his big year in the lower 48 big year. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Jeremy. Thanks so much for being here. Excited to hear about the presentation.
Thank you for having me. He did a great introduction. I guess I don't have to repeat myself or my name or anything like that. I know several people here already. For those that don't know me and just interested, really appreciate you coming out. Barry, Jim, thank you for having me. And yeah, we'll just dive right into this talk. So in 2020, which everyone in the back of their mind is already like, oh, 2020, we know all about 2020. It was, you know, what a year, right? So for me, it started off very different than a lot of other people, and then it got, you know, I faced a lot of the same issues that a lot of you guys had, but all while looking at birds. So I went birding every single day in 2020. I did not take a single day off. So 2020, so lower 48 big year, birds, pandemic, of course, and a record-breaking year for me. So and I'll explain how that all kind of came about. So dive right in. All the pictures on this, by the way, were taken by me or were taken during 2020. So it's kind of fun. All right, so yeah, we'll talk about a big year, and then at the end of it, I'm going to talk a little about the Toledo Zoo, just kind of mention some of the bird conservation work that we do there, and then some of the bird conservation that we do abroad, so outside of the United States even, so a lot of people aren't aware that we do some of that kind of work. So I'm just going to highlight that at the end very little bit. So so if that's what you're here for, that might be a different talk, but we're mostly going to talk about my big year. So it's hard to sum up a whole entire year of your life in 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to do my best. I can get long-winded at any time you want to ask a question. Just either blurt it out or just raise your hand. I love engaging, so that helps me kind of like break up my rambles and my thoughts sometimes too. So if you guys ask a question,
and also on Zoom, they can use the chat window.
Cool. Do you see that when it pops up? Okay. So if you ask a question on Zoom, please feel free. He'll kind of nudge me and say there's a question on there. So we'll get that answered as well for you. So, and I'm going to try to stay in this camera view for you guys. All right. So I did want to talk about like, I know this is kind of like a naturalist kind of thing. So not everyone's familiar with big years and all the kind of what goes into like a big year, what it is even. But a big year is the competition with yourself to see as many bird species as possible in the designated region. And I picked the lower 48 United States. For me, that was the most accessible. A lot of people will do what's called an ABA big year, which includes Alaska and Hawaii. And I just didn't have that much money to be going to those kind of places. It's expensive to be traveling around for a whole year. So I get asked that a lot, and you guys can ask me too, like, well, how much money did you spend? Or like, why isn't that super costly? But we'll talk a little bit about that too. But so yeah, so it's a competition to see as many birds as possible. I did not go out to try to break a record. I really wanted to fill in gaps in my list, and so to speak. Like, I knew I had never seen like Guinness and sage grouse in Colorado. So I was like, there's the opportunity to see birds like that. And so like, I really want to just kind of travel around and look at birds for a year. It's really what I want to do. So like I said, on here, I want to clean up regularly occurring species. I wanted to get into those niche habitats and those range restricted species that I haven't been to yet. And then I also did a lot of chasing or going after rare birds. And a rare bird, I'll define what I consider what a rare bird is: the birds that don't normally occur in the lower 48. So not necessarily a bird that is a range restricted bird within the United States, but a bird that literally just shouldn't be in the United States. So Eurasian vagrants, or birds that maybe have come from further south, like from Mexico or something like that, then have like popped up into like Arizona or New Mexico or Texas or something. So those kind of was what I considered rare. Those are the birds that I would go out of my way to chase. Oh, wait, I got to explain that picture. That is me wading through water, as you can see. I'm in Rhode Island somewhere, and I did not, well, I live in Ohio, so tides aren't a thing. So, and everyone's like, oh yeah, go at low tide for this little stint. You just walk across a little bit of water. Well, I went at high tide. And that's me with my binoculars over my head, and I'm stripped down into my underwear, I think. Well, I think I was in my underwear, and just walked across this channel that is that's the tide. That's like running water. So, and I had to get to this mud flat that's on the other side because there was a bird called a little stint over there, and I was definitely going to go see a little stint. So, so anyways, that's one little glimpse of something that's kind of seems absurd now that I did, but yeah, that's me wading through water to go see a little stint. Okay, so what the hell was I thinking trying to do a big year, right? So like, why would someone be compelled to like spend the whole entire year going and sacrificing a year of their life to look at birds and doing this whole thing? Well, I had a lot of inspiration to go do this. First off, books like Kingbird Highway, written by Ken Kaufman, who's a local here now. I had read that book when I first started birding, and just this kid going out there and going hitchhiking around and seeing all these birds, and I was just like, wow, that's a journey that I can never have fathomed of having something like that, doing on my own. I read blogs. I loved, at my desk job, I would just sit and read blogs about birds and people going out on these adventures to go look at these birds, and I was just really wanted to go do something like that. And of course, The Big Year, the movie, it's one of my favorite movies. I just could sit there and just like watch it over and over and over again. And, these guys are traveling all around. And I watch that movie now and I have a completely different perspective on it. Cause I'm like, oh, like I went there. Like I did that, like same thing. I was like, oh, this doesn't even seem that crazy. Like I did that too. Like, so like now I watch it, I'm like, this makes sense. So, but yeah, so that movie was like an inspiration for me. I did a lot of planning. I knew I was going to do a big year in 2020. I learned where the birds are going to be. I learned where I wanted to be during certain parts of the year. So there wasn't a lot of like guesswork involved. I knew what I wanted to do. So I did have an ambitious goal still. I still wanted to try to see maybe like around 600 birds, which is a lot still. So, and then, yeah, so it says Hocking College. So I went to Hocking College, whoever's familiar with that, down in southeastern Ohio. And I had graduated in 2019. And that led me with like a gap of space where I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go get my, I was in the Navy. I had a job at a hospital that I quit to pursue more nature-y path career. Graduated college, and I found, for the first time in my life, having an opening where I could, maybe spend a year looking at birds. And I had money saved, a little bit of money saved. So I was like, okay, it's fathomable, so I can do this. So with some budgeting and planning, in graduating college, I was like, I'm going for it. So I knew I was going to do a big year in 2020, where some people stumble into it. So where do I start, right? So this is me January 1st in 2020. As by the way, I lose weight. I lost like 30 pounds during my book. So a lot more driving than eating. So that's me, Everglades National Park. That's about, I think, like 3 a.m. And I'm hearing a great horned owl behind me. So that was the first bird I got for the year, was a great horned owl. My friend Cole was with me. He took that picture. We spent the night in tents in Everglades National Park for New Year's Eve, and woke up in the morning, and there was an Antillean palm swift on the Keys. So very South Florida. And I was like, that's the rarest bird in the US right now. I want to start my big year off with a bang. I want to go see this Antillean palm swift. I was like, this is it. I was like, here we go. Well, I waited all day at a golf course for this Antillean palm swift that had been seen there for like months. Well, New Year's Eve, there was a firework display. And I think the firework display displaced my swift. So I started the year off very, well, not very hard, but I was like, I missed. I dipped on the first bird of the year that I wanted to go see. I did see other birds around, of course, but the big rare bird that I went down to Florida to go see was not there. So I was like, okay, well, this is a sign of things to come, right? It was starting off the year like this. But I quickly recalculated, saw some other good birds in Florida, and went on my very first cross-country road trip for the year. This is what a typical month looked like for me. And I have a picture of every month. All those pin marks on those maps are places that I bird watched for the year. Like I said, I bird watched every single day. So therefore, there should be a pin mark for every single day of the year on these maps. So this is just January. And these are all the I'm not gonna name all those, but those are all the states I went to in just January. I ended January with 257 species of bird. So I was like, I'm off to an okay start. So 257, I had 6 lower 48 lifers, so 6 birds I had never seen before in the lower 48. And I had 4 light birds I'd never just before seen in my whole entire life already. And I was like, January's off to a great start. it was a fantastic way to like spend the first party month. And you can see I spent it in the South because warmth, right? So a lot of warm weather. So skipping out on the Ohio winters. I was Dayton, Ohio native, by the way. So like Southwestern Ohio. So if anyone knows my base of operation, it was Dayton, Ohio. So none of those places are home except for those little blue dots that near Dayton. I wasn't there much, as you can see. This is my college friend, Connor. He joined me on the first 3 weeks of my trip. That's us at the Grand Canyon. That was in January. This is us setting up tents. I did a lot of camping. I was doing a lot of budget birding. So I either slept in my car, slept in tents, friends' houses, etc., to save as much money as possible. Hotels were a thing of luxury that I was not prepared to pay for. Yeah.
Did you eat cat food?
I did not eat cat food, but I did get asked, like, what did you eat? Like, there was like go-to things, right? So I did indulge. I'm a big coffee drinker. I have a coffee right over there. I did a lot of Starbucks. So I would just go through Starbucks because I knew I could be in and out in a hurry, get my food and my coffee in one go, and it was reliable. It was like consistent. I knew exactly what I was getting when I was getting there. People give me like Starbucks gift cards sometimes too, and I would have like availability and stuff like that. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the birds I saw. That's a little blue heron. Nothing rare about little blue heron. I just like that picture. That was me sitting at the golf course and just waiting for my pond swift. And I was like, I'll just take pictures of little blue heron. So, but this bird is an American dipper that Connor and I had the chance to see in New Mexico. A bird that likes to hang out in like little montane areas, but it's one of my favorite birds. I wanted to put the picture. I had it by the end of January, one of my favorite birds, and it was great. And it's a little passerine bird that hangs out in streams and fast water. And this juvenile bird was hanging out in right near Albuquerque. So came out of the mountains, and I think they got a lot of snow up in the mountains, so it came down a little further south, and it was good to see. I'm not much of a photographer, by the way, but I was ambitious when I started my big year to take a lot of good pictures, and that quickly dwindled out of like laziness and me just like wanting to go see birds. So I wouldn't tote around my big camera. I took a lot of pictures through my cell phone. You'll see as the picture quality dwindles as the year goes on. Okay, so February we fly. So I took my first plane ride in February. As you can tell, right, where I ended up in as a plane would take me, I ended up in Washington. There was a bird called a Siberian Encenter, and this is a heck of a rare bird. And I knew, I was like, all right, I'm dedicated. I'm committing. I'm gonna take my first flight. And I did. I flew for a single bird, Siberian Encenter. I got it. It was fantastic. I ended up back in the Keys in February for a thick-billed vireo. This is just February. I mean, so all these maps are just single months. It's kind of, I look at them and it just blows my mind everywhere that I went. I went everywhere. I took my first pelagic. For those who don't know what a pelagic is, it's just a boat trip out onto the water to go see ocean birds. So I took my first pelagic in February, cold one out of Hatteras, North Carolina. And I made it to Saxon Bog, which is in Minnesota. So you can see all those little check marks up in Minnesota, but we'd go up there to see boreal species of birds, owls, and stuff like that. So I had to go back there at the end of the year because I didn't see all the birds I needed to see there, but that's okay. Yeah, I just look at this map, I can remember like what I was doing, like all this stuff. It's super cool. Like the Wisconsin one, that's a Greater Prairie Chicken check mark. I already know what I saw there. So I hit 19 states in February alone. It was pretty cool. Here's some February photos. Barnacle geese, I saw in New England and Massachusetts. I was talking about those pelagics. That is the bird that I went to go see. That is called a great skua. So that's the target, like the main target bird if you're out in Hatteras waters in February, if you're freezing your ass off for seems like no reason until this big old boy comes by. That's exciting. It's just a slugger of a bird called a gray skua. Kind of looks like a Jaeger, but it's bigger and it has this like big old white flashes when it flies. It's just hard to mistake it for anything else, and it just looks like a brawler. But when they call it out over the radio on the boat, and you're out in the middle of the ocean freezing, and they're like skua, you're like, what? I was sitting next to a gentleman next to me, and we both like pop up, we both get it, and we're like both excited, and like we're on a boat, right? So we're like walking back and forth, and I was like, he was an older gentleman, and I without thinking twice, I like slapped him on his back. And I was like, oh, you're excitement. Cause like, we just like saw this really rare bird on the ocean. and he fell because he was on the boat, we're already going like this, and I slapped him and I threw him off, and I was like, but he didn't even care because he just saw this bird. He just like popped right back up, and he's just like, it doesn't matter. Like we're like, look at the bird that we just saw. And it's like, okay, cool. But yeah, anyways, you get excited when you see these birds sometimes. So this is me and my friends Leslie and Carl. I try to go to a lot of national parks, which got harder during the pandemic, but we'll talk about that. But that's us before the pandemic, the last normal month, right? So we're at Olympic National Park because we were already there to see. This is at Siberian Center, by the way. Not a very good photo. It was kind of far away, but very happy to see it. You should have seen how many people, like lines of like scopes and binoculars, just people just like peering into this field that had like one tree in it. And this bird would like, wouldn't be in the tree, and then it would be in the tree, and everyone's like, whoa, and all you hear is paparazzi. These geese were hiding behind a church down a hill, and yeah, I was like, I know where the geese are, and I'm gonna walk behind the church, and I did, and there were these two barnful geese staring me right in the face. Awesome birds. All right, March. So the pandemic officially begins, right? So I was kind of ignoring it until March because I was like, maybe like most people, like maybe like, oh, this is just like, it's happening on the news, but it's like, is it happening? Like maybe not, right? So I kept on hearing about it. I took my last normal flight to Texas to go see this bird called the white wagtail. Everything was pretty normal when I left to go see the white wagtail. When I flew back home, only a couple days later, it seemed like it was like a 180. Columbus, I flew into Columbus. It was like a ghost town. It was like everything had like shut down. It seemed like overnight. We're wearing masks now. It was just like really a blink of an eye kind of thing. There was other people doing big years. I was getting phone calls saying they're going to stop doing their big year. They're just going to go home. Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe you did mention it, but what are the blue icons versus the fires?
So I think the red ones are just official hotspots. So like places to go see, like established hotspots for birds. The blue ones are like personal checklists. So if I was just like somewhere seeing a bird, I would just like do my own personal checklist. So the blues are personal spots. The reds are like established hotspots. So like if we were to like here, Secor would be like an established hotspot. But if like you're at your backyard doing one, that'd be like the difference. So yeah, that's the only difference is the actual hotspot red, personal hotspot. So you saw a pinned bird. That's all. So yeah, so I took my last normal flight. I got home in full pandemic mode. I never once considered quitting because of the pandemic. I was just like, what am I going to do? I don't have a real job right now. I plan on working a little bit during the pandemic, actually, or during my big year. I plan on taking like side jobs and stuff like that and doing things for friends. And I worked with bands over the years, and I plan on continuing to do some of that work. That all got canceled. And I was like, well, I really have nothing else to do, and birding seems really safe. So I continued on. I went up to Niagara Falls, saw a bird called Little Gull, got to see the falls. Ohio played a big role in my big year. There's a lot of good birds, a lot of good birding in Ohio. And that was definitely in my plans all along. So I got 2 owls in March that I hadn't seen yet. And that was northern saw-whet owl and long-eared owls. Those are tough birds to get in general. They're secretive. People keep them secret. And luckily, Ohio birders knew I was doing a big year. And they're like, go-to spots, boom, boom. And I got those. Another thing that happened in March, not only did the pandemic start, my parents moved at the beginning of March from my childhood home in Dayton to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that gave me an opportunity to have another like base of operations, which is really nice. So not only did I now living in Dayton, now I could go be in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the Southwest and stay somewhere like basically. And there's lots of rare birds that happen in the Southwest. So there's a northern saw-whet owl that I saw here in Ohio. Took that through my binoculars. So that's how I started taking pictures of birds, just through my binoculars. That was through my scope. That's the white wagtail in Texas. I always just remember that was the last normal flight for a long time, years. But that's my white wagtail. It was worth it. If you ever go to Asia or anything like that, those are pretty common birds, by the way. But here in the lower 48, actually, you can find those in Alaska too with some ease too. But like I said, lower 48 bird, it's great. April, so we we're gonna, it says it's cut off, says let's migrate, baby. But I knew how I wanted to spend migration. I had planned it. I knew that I wanted to, a lot of people are like, oh, you're gonna do Texas for migration, all the migrants come through there. And I was like, no. I was like, I'll be in Ohio in May. I know where I'll be. So I knew there's some migrants that I wanted to pick up, some Western ones, but I knew where I wanted to be for migration. I went to Colorado for some prairie chickens. If no one's ever had a chance to see Lecking prairie chickens in person, it is insane and it's awesome, and I highly recommend it. They're such weird birds and so cool, and I don't know, just them puffing up, and they're unreal. Watch a YouTube video if you've never seen it, at least. It's so cool. Prairie chickens are great. I drove across, so this is all me driving mostly, and I got the opportunity to drive cross country with my sister. And in Nebraska, me and my sister saw Hudsonia godwits, and that was a really special thing. My sister's not a birder. She's much younger than me too, by like 10 years. So we don't, kind of really, have a lot in common, but to spend, quality time as a cross-country road trip with my sister, and me gets to experience birds and show her like, hey, this is what I'm doing, was really meaningful to me, and it's a memory that I could kind of cherish. So in Nebraska, seeing Hudsonia godwits and my sister was really cool. So I got to clean up a lot of birds also here and there, and I was getting ready for the big push. Like right May, the birds are coming. I knew it. I knew I had to be in Ohio. So I also, a weird thing is I got to be in Shawnee, so Southern Ohio, without the crowd. So every year since 2014, I've been going down to Shawnee late April to go experience migration. And I still went to Shawnee because I knew where the birds were going to be. Even though there's going to be nobody, all the rest of my friends and all the rest of the birders weren't going to be there. So it was really weird to be in those woods and not have groups with me, and not have, the camaraderie of the other birders with me, and just experiencing the birds alone without everybody was interesting. So, but I was in Shawnee at the end of April, and I'm excited to be in Shawnee this year with should be big groups. So should be back to normal this year, and I'm excited for that. So I'm also the keynote speaker this year at Shawnee, so it should be fun. Little plug there. Oh, so here's some chickens for you. That's the greater prairie chicken over there. Just look how cool it is. They have these air sacs on the front. They blow them up and they make this like bloop, bloop noise. It's pretty cool. It's a Hudsonia godwit that I got to see with my sister. So chickens and stuff. May. So knowing migration, right? So I love migration. It's one of my favorite times of the year. It should be like everyone's favorite time of year. There's like too much to do in May. Like you can't, there's wildflowers coming up, there's birds, there's everything just happens in May. It's just makes your head spin. But I knew where I wanted to be. As you can tell, I spent a lot more time near Ohio. So with that being said, there was a bird called the crescent-chested warbler, super rare bird. Probably only a handful of records ever for the US, and it showed up at the beginning of May. So I had to hightail it, drive all the way from Ohio to Arizona. Those little spots in the middle, that's like where I would like stop like on drives and go birding. So like that's like back and forth to go get to Arizona and stuff like that. So when I was like chasing birds, so I wanted to go see this crescent-chested warbler. Really cool birds, and there's actually two of them, and they ended up breeding, but a Mexican jay ate their babies. So, but anyway, still cool record. So on the drive back to Ohio, I stopped in Columbus one time, when I got back to Ohio for a golden winged warbler, a bird that I find tough to see every year. They're getting harder to see. I feel like in like 2014 and 15, I would like find them somewhat regularly. And the past couple of years, I just had trouble. So Ohio came through for me again. The only golden winged warbler I saw all year. I also popped over to New Jersey. There's two birds. So I was like, for one of these birds, I probably would have gone. It's curlew sandpiper and a ruff. So two different Asian shorebirds in one spot. And I was like, and I debated. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go. And I decided to drive. This is a crazy story. I decided to drive through the night to get there in the morning. And to keep myself awake, I decided to watch a TV show. And I was like, this will keep me awake. I'll at least have it's like a podcast. I didn't really watch the TV show. I like kept it on. I can't remember what TV show I watched now. Waco. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Anyways, I watched it and I was like, I didn't know much about Waco, Texas, by the way, but I was too young for that. So anyways, I learned all about Waco, Texas and stuff like that. It kept me awake, and got to New Jersey. I saw my curlew sandpiper, but I missed the ruff. And that was the second time I looked for a ruff that year. So I missed it times 2. And then I went to the biggest week in American birding, but it was the smallest week in American birding because the crowds were like diminished. Great. Like locals were there, it seemed like, but everyone else was like, you know, staying at home. And it was weird to be like at places like McGee and stuff like that. And like, or like other places around, like wearing a mask and stuff like that. It was odd. But, you know, we did it. But I had my best self-found bird of the year while I was up here. And that was a Kirtland's warbler. So I had planned to just chalk it up and just drive to Michigan and see my Kirtland's warbler. Luckily enough for me, it was an insane day. I was at Metzger Marsh. I had seen well over 100 species. I had seen 29 species of warbler. It was just like a day like no other. And as I'm driving out of the park, there was a Kirtland's warbler. I saw it from my car. I was like, they're big, chunky warbler, and they move like they bob their tails and bob their bodies. So they're very obvious to see if you know what you're looking for. And I slammed on my brakes, and there was a car behind me, another birder. And I jumped out of the car, like couldn't get out of the car fast enough. I was like, there's a Kirtland's warbler in that tree. And sure enough, like we got people on it, and it's stuck around the rest of the evening. And but that was my best self-found bird for the whole year, maybe like ever. So it was really, really exciting. But I love birding up here. And I would spend every migration in Ohio, by the way. So everyone's like, where would you go birding for migration? Ohio, Northwestern Ohio, here. So this is the spot. I ended up having to go to Indiana, chase another ruff again, and then Connecticut warbler. I had to get a Connecticut warbler in Indiana too, because that bird is tough. Some May photos. That's me at Metzger. That's the curlew sandpiper in New Jersey. That's a crescent-chested warbler. That's my looks. So I got to the spot where it was being seen, and I actually got it like right as like the sun was like kind of setting, so you can see like the picture is cracked, but you can see the crescent on it. Yeah, good bird. And then that's my Kirtland's warbler that I found. So yeah. More May photos. I did actually make it to Hatteras again in North Carolina. And my friend Connor had started working there, who we saw at the beginning of the presentation, and he was a kayak guide at this point. And he took me out on his kayaks, and we went birding and see prothonotary warblers along the river and stuff like that. That's my ruff that I ended up getting in Indiana. So if you've never been on pelagics, they're very weather dependent. And you're just praying that you wake up at 3 a.m. and you don't have a text from the captain saying, no pelagic, the weather's bad. So I had planned on going out for 7 days, a week long of pelagics, every single day, waking up so early, getting on the boat, going out. To get out to the Gulf Stream, it takes 2 hours. So it's an 8-hour pelagic. You take 2 hours to get just trawling out there, get into the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream to see that's where the birds are, that's where the food is. And then you bird for about 4 hours and then 2 hours back. Those days beat the heck out of you. You're exposed to the elements, you're getting salt spray the whole time. They're rough days. So day number 2 rolls around. I wake up early. I have a text message, no pelagic, cancel weather. I'm like, whew, I'm going back to sleep. So I was like, I'm just sleeping it off. So I finally, and I'm sleeping at the dock, and I wake up in my car to like 15 missed phone calls. And I'm like, uh-oh. I was like, my friends, Victor and Ruben Stoll had called me a whole bunch, and they were supposed to be on the pelagic as well. They're good birders. They actually got up in the morning and went birding. They found this bird called the white-winged tern, and there's probably less than 20 records of this bird in the US, 15 minutes away from where I was sleeping. And they knew where I was, and they were trying to call and wake me up to see this bird. And they were like, finally I called them, when they're like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm sleeping. Like, you know, like no pelagic today, guys. Like, calm down, you know? And they're like, we have a white-winged tern. You guys, you have to come see it. And it was like rainy and crappy weather. And I'm just like, I'm on my way. I made that 15-minute drive in 10 minutes, and the bird was still there. That's it. That's the bird. It looks like a black tern almost. It's like the Eurasian version of a black tern. So very cool bird. Somehow made it across the ocean. So canceled pelagic, still got a heck of a good bird for the day. So I wasn't even mad about the pelagic being canceled after that. This is what some of my views from the pelagic. If you're on a pelagic and an actual rare bird is seen, adrenaline goes, your heart's pumping. It is like birding like no other. It is my favorite way to go birding. I love pelagic birding. If someone was like, "Am I going to pelagic tomorrow?" I'm like, "Yes, let's go." So I will spend all my time on the ocean. I was also in the Navy for 8 years, so maybe I'm biased. So I like being on the ocean. But this bird is all the same bird. That is a Trindade petrel, and I go out with seabirding out of Hatteras, and Brian is kind of like this like mellow, very monotone, kind of like just kind of like talks, and whether he never kind of shows emotion. I don't know how to describe it. He just doesn't show this emotion. His counterpart is Kate Sutherland. She's out there spotting the birds. She has a lot of emotion, and when she sees a rare bird, she like screams it at the top of her lungs, and you're like, so you know something's happening. She doesn't want anyone to miss it, and so she just screams out like Trindade petrel, and you're just like, whoa, like so. Now you're just like looking around to see where she's looking, and these birds just come in and they zoom right by the boat, and there's like, it's like no other. It's so fun to see a rare bird out in the ocean. This is my view right here. This is where I like to hang out on that boat. I'm not getting the spray in the front. I'm sitting in the back, like hunkered in. I don't like to be inside the actual boat itself because I don't want to get seasick. And if you're inside, you feel cramped and just can't get I don't know. I sit outside the whole entire time. And the sunrises every morning are absolutely gorgeous. So Trindade petrel. I got lots of good birds, lots of great pelagic birds. I did a lot of pelagics in general. So June, I'm trying to make it get us through the year. So June, I didn't want to slow down. So I did the last of my pelagics. So last 07, they actually ran from like the end of May to the beginning of June. So I did the last string of pelagics. And then I went down to the dry tortugas. I put dry turtle here. Tortugas is Spanish for turtle, but I went down to the dry tortugas. And if anyone knows where those are, I'll just give you a little glimpse. You got to get to Florida. You got to go Highway 1 all the way down to the Key West. Then you got to get on another boat, and then you got to go 50 miles more west. And then you're on the small little island called the Dry Tortugas, and it's a national park, but it is a place where seabirds nest. So there's nesting terns and boobies and stuff like that. So it's a place where I saw only a handful of species, but I didn't see them anywhere else in the US that year. So it's a must go to place. During pandemic, it was weird. At first, they were like, no trips to the Dry Tortugas. And I was like, what? I was like, there's like literally like a half a dozen species I need to see on the Dry Tortugas. And then finally they opened it up. They said, we'll do 1 day a week. We're going to take one boat ride a week. So I knew I had to be there at that week. I wanted to go, and I wanted to go see these birds. I actually missed one of the birds that I wanted to see on the Dry Tortugas, and there's no possible way for me to like stick around for a week and try to go on it again. So it would have been different if it wasn't pandemic time. I could have gone the next morning and just gone again to the Dry Tortugas, but because of the pandemic, it was a no-go. I went over to Texas to do the Death March, the Kalima Warbler Death March, if anyone's familiar with this. You have to get to Big Bend National Park, and then you have to start hiking early in the morning before the sun gets up because it gets super hot there in the summer. And then you have to hike up this big old trail with switchbacks and not get eaten by mountain lions. And then when you get to the very top, you hope to see this bird called a Kalima Warbler. Only place in the U.S. that's the only place where they breed is Big Bend in the U.S. So it's the only place you're going to see it. You have to do the walk. It's a little strenuous. It's actually harder on your knees on the way down, just like any hike, right? But yeah, did the Death March, so survived it. I went down to the valley. When I say the valley, I went lower Rio Grande Valley, and I missed this bird called a red-billed pigeon, which will come into play here in a couple slides. This bird is a bird that like should be down in the valley. You should kind of run into it if you spend enough time like looking for it. I was not having any luck, and I was missing it every time I was getting down to the valley. And while I was in the valley, I got a text message that said this bird called an eared quetzal is back in Arizona. And I was like, this is a bird that like every like US bird wants to see. This eared quetzal is like what a trogon is? If you know what a trogon is, it's related to a trogon. So I was like, oh man, I want to see this eared quetzal so bad. And I think actually in Kingbird High, like Ken Kaufman talks about seeing eared quetzal, but he actually went down to Mexico to see it. But I was like, I want to see this quetzal. I have to. So I drove from the valley of Texas through the night, and I got harassed by Border Patrol so much because I took the southern route and I went all near the border the whole entire time. I had Border Patrol one time follow me for over 2 hours, the same truck. And then I stopped at a Border Patrol crossing super late at night. There was nobody else there. And I got literally 1,000 questions. What are you doing? I'm going to look at birds. They're like, no way. They're like, that is such a made up story. And then they're like, well, our dog is like scenting on your car. I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, can we search your car? I was like, no, I'm looking at birds. I was like, what do you mean? They're like, do you have dirty laundry in here? I was like, probably. I was like, I've been living out of this car, you know? So they're like, oh, like, I just got harassed by border patrol all night, but got to the eared quetzal spot, got the bird. It was very, very rewarding. There was a lot of other birders there looking for it. And then I made it to Rhode Island. I think this was technically the first time I was going to Rhode Island. I never would have thought to go to Rhode Island to go look at birds. I had no agenda to like, I'm going to go to Rhode Island to go look at birds. I ended up having to go to Rhode Island for 3 different seriously rare birds. And I've never been to Rhode Island before that for birding or since then to go birding, to give you an idea. So Rhode Island opened up like a portal and they were like, here's rare birds. So it was a weird time, but I ended up going to Rhode Island at the end of the month, June. More pelagic birds. This is the Fayette's petrel, tiny little pterodroma. They are fantastic birds. I mean, the black and white coloration, awesome. That's a great shearwater, a little bit more common out there, especially in the summertime on the Gulf Stream. Awesome bird. Just posed for me nicely, so I thought I would share that picture with you. More sunrises. The sunrise, you can't beat the sunrise of the ocean. More June photos. When I was down the Keys, I saw this bird called a mangrove cuckoo. Looked like our yellow-billed cuckoo, similar. They got a little more creamy color to them, but they can hang out in those mangroves. That's a Pteryx sandpiper, and in front of it, can anyone tell what that bird in front of it is? That's a piping plover. Yeah, I was like completely ignoring piping plover. I was like, whatever, this is a endangered species. I was like, there's a Pteryx sandpiper. You know, that's what I want to look at. So this Pteryx sandpiper is a super cool bird from Eurasia, and it has this like slightly upturned bill, and it's like a bird I'd only seen in like books. And that was a life bird for me, and I was like, oh, unheard of in the lower 48, basically. Maybe it's the second record ever for the lower 48, and the fact that it was in Rhode Island, it was just mind blowing. So I had to go see that. That's the little Toledo warbler I did the Death March for up there, and then that beautiful prize winning picture in the corner is my eared quetzal. That I saw it much better than I took the picture. So it's like to stay hidden. It's a big bird, but they like to skulk. And then of course you can't beat a puffin. That's me looking at the puffins on another boat trip somewhere in Maine. You know, always on a boat, always looking for birds. But puffins, can't beat an Atlantic puffin specifically. More June. This is the dried tortugas. So the dried tortugas was a prison, and it's not a prison anymore, but that's what it looks like. That's a prison. That's one of the terns out there. Swallowtail kite. So that's a yellow-winged vireo. When I got done with my Kalima warbler, when I got right outside of Big Bend, there was a report of this rare yellow-green vireo, which is decently rare for the U.S. Took advantage of it, was right there already, saw that bird. That's me in Arizona, just looking out the window. The views, I mean, the places a big year will bring you, or birding just in general will bring you, are beautiful. Sometimes they're like in a neighborhood, or like, you know, you're looking at like a dump or something like that, whatever. But there's also really pretty places, you know. And then right above it is a tropical perula, also pretty decently rare for the US. I try to put my rare birds on here. July. All right, so July had me going to some like getting like these birds that I would have like never gone on my way to go see beforehand. So I was in Nevada, and I went up to the Ruby Mountains. And if you ever see the Big Year movie, they take the helicopter to go see the Himalayan snowcock. I did that, but instead of affording a helicopter, I had to do the hike. It's a long hike, and I wish now I would have known what I know now would be keep on hiking further up, because we hike up, you get to this lake, and then there's like another mile you can hike up. I stayed at the base of the lake, and I only heard the snowcocks calling in the morning. I actually never got to see the snowcock. Everyone's like, you gotta go higher up to see the snowcocks. And I was like, oh, like I knew that. But anyways, got the snowcock, heard it only. I got very few herd-only birds for the year. I mostly saw almost every single one. I think I only had like 4 or 5 herd-only birds for the whole entire year. So it's just getting high in Colorado. I actually don't do drugs, so this is just funny because I was in Colorado, and the highest birding that I did was in the Rocky Mountain National Park. looking for whitetail ptarmigan. So there's nothing like searching for this ptarmigan, hiking up there over 10,000 feet and just not being able to breathe because you're like, oh, where's this bird? And you're like, I can't be this out of shape, you know, you're like just like out of breath looking for this bird. And yeah, and then I saw another bird in Idaho, which is like an odd place to go birding if you're not from that area. But I saw this bird called like Cassia crossbill. This looks a lot like a red crossbill. So those are like bucket list birds. I would have like never gone for those birds unless I was doing this big year. That's me at the base of the Ruby Mountains, at the base of that lake, looking up, scanning up top for the Himalayan snowcock, which I never saw. And I heard it, but I was hearing it calling. That's a ptarmigan. As you can see, camouflages nicely. That is a picture of me hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. And as you can see, just looking for this like basically needle in a haystack, this bird that just camouflages so good. Very cold up there. There's still snow up there in the middle of summer. And then while I was in Colorado, I got hip to this tip. Someone told me like, hey, do you have black rail? And I don't know if anyone knows anything about black rails, but they are a very secretive bird, very hard to see, let alone photograph. They're very tough birds. But I ran to a lady and she gave me exact pin. She's like, if you go to this spot, you'll see black rail, or you'll hear them, is what she told me. And I was like, perfect. I was like, I just need to hear it at least. So I get to the spot, middle of nowhere, Colorado. I get out of my car. And as soon as I get out of my car, I can hear black rails on both sides of me. And I was like, they're calling back and forth to each other. And I was like, I found a spot right on the side of the road. I was like, if I sit right here, one of these birds are going to investigate the other bird eventually. And I was like, I just know it. I was like, I know it. So I sat there, and sure enough, if a black rail didn't pop out, like a chance of a lifetime. So I took this picture. I even did the smart thing for a change where I like made sure my settings were right on my camera. So this bird popped out. That's a black rail. This bird's like that big, and it's black and it skulks in the marshes. It's really, really fun bird. Like I said, I like to visit national parks. Drove through Zion National Park. So August. So August, another like slow month, I guess. I only went to 5 states, which is a slow month for me. I was in Rhode Island again. That picture at the beginning with me wading through the water to look for the little stint. Back to Rhode Island again. Very much like Forrest Gump when he was like, oh, like I met the president again. That was me like doing like the same thing. I was like, oh, I was in Texas again. I was like, oh, where were you? I was like, oh, just in the Florida Keys. What do you think? Like, duh. No, that was me. Like I seemed to be ending up in the same places over and over. I mean, you can see on there, I was back down in southern Arizona again. I did 3 pelagics out of California. Like I said, spent a lot of time on the water, and that really helps you get your numbers up when you're doing a big year, because those are the only place you're going to see so many different like seabirds, basically. So that really helped me get my numbers up. So, and I like being on the ocean. I knew I wanted to see those birds. So when I say I broke a record, I did without intending to, but like it's because I did so many. Like I had a nice strategy, but I didn't realize how good of a strategy it was. And people, now my record's been broken, they realize how good of a strategy I did, and I think they kind of like copied what I did and like capitalized on it. So, which is great. Anyway, I spent a lot of time in California. So August and like September were like my California months. So I spent 3 weeks in August in California. There's a lot of birds in California. It's a huge state. I had to spend a lot of time there. It's not my favorite state in general. It's expensive just to be in California. So the gas is more expensive, everything like that. It's harder to find places to sleep in your car in California. It's not the most like economically friendly state to be in. And I had to spend quite an amount of good time there in August. Back in Ohio, I love shouting out Ohio. Got my buff-breasted sandpiper for the year in Ohio. So there's some August photos, more national parks, weird bird on the right, you know, but sometimes you see stuff like that when you're on pelagics, just whales. I mean, there is something about a whale that will just take your breath away. And I saw a lot of whales during my big year. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, humpback? Humpback? Does anyone know? Humpback, yeah. I think it's humpback. I saw a lot of whales, a lot of different species of whale. That's my little stint picture. When I went across the water, I had my cell phone in one hand and my binoculars in the other, and I would snap that photo. More grouse. This bird on the bottom, another quick little story time. That's a common crane. So think of it as like the sandhill crane of Eurasia. And there had been one in New Mexico in January. So me and my friend Connor spent 36 hours, 3 days in a row, going to Bosque del Apache in January to look for this bird. Now, when we're looking for that bird, we were looking through tens of thousands of sandhill cranes. So literally like a different colored needle in a stack of needles is what you're like looking for. It was impossible. So when I was in California, I luckily got information of another common crane. I still need to see it hanging out. And this time he is not hanging out with cranes. He was hanging out with geese, a little bit easier to see. So I got lucky. That's just an albatross, black-browed albatross, pelagic birds, you know, just an albatross, you know, another one. Once you see 6,000 for the year, you're kind of over them. So no, just kidding. You never over albatross. Fantastic birds. I saw 2 species of albatross during my big year. It was black-browed and liaison albatross. There was a third possibility of another albatross that I did not see, unfortunately, but it is what it is. And that's short-tailed albatross. Okay, September. More California, as you can see. I went to Santa Cruz Island, so another national park, and that national park is really cool because it's Channel Islands National Park, but it's only place in the world to see the island scrub jay. It's one of the most limited range species in the whole world, and probably our most limited range species in the US. Actually, it is. It's just found on this one island off the coast of California. It's the island scrub jay. So I had to take a boat again to this island, and then once you see the bird, like you can get right off the boat and you can see the bird like instant. Then I'm stuck on the island. So I'm like, you're stuck there all day. They're like, people that pay to go out there, they want to stay out there all day. They want to be on the island. Me, the birder in me was like, I was like, let's turn this puppy back around. I was like, let's go home. So anyways, I spent the day on the island looking for other birds. There's like Allen's hummingbirds, and there's some cool birds, but got the scrub jay. And then I spent 5 days in a row without getting off the boat on this boat called the Searcher. So when I say the pandemic had its ups and downs for me, this is one of the ups, because the Searcher is a pelagic that has very limited room, and it books out years in advance usually. I got a call from a friend and said, hey, we booked our pelagic the Searcher like years ago, and we just like got off the phone with them, and there's like spaces open on it. And I was like, what? I was like, this is like I was like, no way. So I called the lady, the booking agent, and I was like, hey, I would like to be on this pelagic. Can I come? She's like, oh yeah, we actually have space on. I was like, sign me up. She's like, great. She's got to be $1,400. I said, I was like, can I pay in installments? And she's like, nobody's ever asked to pay in installments on this trip. I was like, please. I was like, I do not have $1,400 just to give over to you, you know, right now. I was like, I just don't have it. And so she was like, okay. She's like, I'll let you pay half right now, and then you can pay half, you know, when you show up to the dock. And I was like, perfect. I was like, that I'll find $700 to bring you when I get there. So, you know, so she, as soon as I showed up, she's like, you owe me money. I was like, yes, I do. But I got to go out for 5 days. So we leave San Diego, California, go out into the ocean, go super far into the ocean. You go up the coast. It's fantastic. They cater you. It's like being on a tiny little cruise. Great food. They have a personal chef on board. You get to stay in little barracks, little cabins. It is awesome. And lots of good seabirds. I mean, I saw probably a half a dozen species that I didn't see anywhere else the rest of my big year. So on that Searcher pelagic, so it was worth the $1,400. As soon as I got off that pelagic boat, we didn't have cell phone service, by the way, because you're on the ocean. It's like I'm like, when you're doing a big year, all you can think about is not what you're doing, is like, where am I going to next? Like, what's the rare bird that's going to pop up? So I'm like, as soon as I'm in a cell phone service, I see it, northern Jacana in southern Arizona, and I was like, heck yeah, that's a good bird. So I was with my friend Ben, and I was like, hey, I know we just got done like 5 days on the ocean, but like, let's drive 6 hours right now. And he was like, let's go. So we got off the boat, drove 6 hours. That's what little red dot is in Arizona, northern Chicana. So it just never stopped. Oh, so this is me on the pelagic. They give you a mug, by the way. You pay $1,400, you get a mug. So pretty cool. We also had to wear a mask the whole entire time on board because it was still during the pandemic. So that's just me just drinking my coffee without my mask. And but yeah, you had to wear a mask the whole entire time on board, which is not a fun way to bird because your binoculars fog up and all that. But that's a blue-footed booby that we saw. We went by some islands and we looked at some nesting booby colonies, and there's a blue-footed one. It's a good bird. This is a juvenile common tern that happened to land on our boat. So one of the researchers on board, picked it up and make sure it was okay, checked it out, and then flew off. Dolphins, mammals, we like other stuff too. We're not just birds. And then that's the juvenile northern jacana that I went to Arizona for. So perfect stuff. That was like when the planets aligned for you. So I cleaned up a lot of my regularly occurring birds for the US. And I knew I had to really start to ramp up the numbers. My numbers were looking really good at this point coming October. And I was like, wow, I'm going to hit 700 species. I was like, but I have to chase rare birds. I was like, that's the only way I'm going to keep on getting these things. Lots of times I was like, I'm in the right place, right time. I'll go see the rare bird. Now I'm like, I'm going to go chase rare birds. Like this is like I went into straight up rare bird focus. So New Mexico, see a little spot in northern New Mexico. There is a bird called the European golden plover, another bird that's like unheard of for the lower 48, showed up in New Mexico. The ones that have showed up have been on the coast. The fact that it was inland and in New Mexico, if everyone remembers, my mom moved to New Mexico. Mom, I'm coming to New Mexico. Pick me up from the airport, please. So I flew into Albuquerque and I looked, I'm not kidding. My sister grabbed me from the airport, drove me to my mom's house, and I get to my mom's house and I go, can I borrow your car? And she's like, sure. She's like, just don't wreck it. Cool, I won't. Go up, drive up, see my golden plover, very happy. Driving back down, 2-lane highway. I'm next to a semi, and in the road, there is a giant tire. And I crush it in my mom's car. And I just destroyed the front of her bumper. So sure enough, yeah, I was like, so I bring her car back, and my mom's laid back. It's not my mom's problem, it's my dad. So my mom, I hit something. She's like, it happens. My dad's like, what? Like, what? And I was like, you're probably gonna need to file an insurance claim. So thanks, Dad. So anyways, that was my only wreck. It wasn't my fault though. All right. Apparently those are called gators. I didn't know that. So it got me. It bit me. Anyways, but I got the bird, so that's what really matters. Then I was like, more rare birds. I was like, great. So there's a bird called a red-legged thrush, closely related to like a robin. And I was like, okay, so it's in the same kind of like tortoise and everything. So anyways, whatever. I was like, I want to see this bird. They've only been in the US a handful of times, and it was on Key West, of course, back in the Keys. And I was like, I'm going to go for this bird. So I drive down, I get to Miami, and I drive Highway 1, which is a nightmare. And then if anyone's ever driven it, it's literally like a 1-lane highway, and then you have to cut through all these like small towns, and there's police officers everywhere. You can't speed. It's awful to drive. Most of the time you're going like 35, and it's like I just want to get to Key West. Awful. What was Jimmy Buffett thinking? Anyway, so I get down there, and the bird is MIA, and I'm like, crap. I was like, I'm not liking the Keys for my numbers. So I was like, okay, it's too expensive for me to stay in the Keys. So I was like, well, I'm going to drive up to Homestead, just north of the Keys, just south of Miami. So I'm going to stay in Homestead, much cheaper. I'm going to get a hotel, whatever. It's like $40 for the night. So I stay in Homestead, and I'm tired. I do the non-birder thing, and I sleep in. My goal was to wake up early and just go to the northern part of the state of Florida to go look for different birds, whatever. And I overslept again, and I wake up to a text message. Thrush being seen right now. It's there again. Thank goodness, because I would have been so far away. I would have never had the time to make it that day to go see the bird. So I get in all my belongings together. I drive back down Highway 1. I'm driving down, and then I get a phone call. Hey, where are you? Oh, I'm on Highway 1. I'm in the Keys. And then my friend goes, oh, well, they have a Bahamas swallow at Florida Keys Hawk Watch. And I can't make this stuff up. as I'm passing the sign for the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. I'm like, what? I'm like, and he's like, Bahamas swallow. He's like, go. I was like, all right, this is a heckin' rare bird. So I was like, all right, I just passed where I could turn off to report. So I had to drive over a bridge, 5 freaking miles, turn around, and then drive back, pull into this state park, jump out of the car, and ask the nice hawk watchers there, is there a Bahamas swallow? And they're like hawk watching, they're like counting hawks. And they're like, yeah, it was over there. And I'm like, I'm like looking for the swallows, and sure enough, a couple Bahamas swallows are just like flying around. And I was like, whew. So I get back in my car, continue on my drive, and I get the red-legged thrush as well. So I got a 2-for-1 because I slept in. So sleeping in pays off. Be lazy sometimes. And then I went back up to the Pacific Northwest again, and I saw a really cool rare bird called a wood sandpiper. This is the hawk watchers hawk watching. This is me being like, woo! I saw my Bahamas swallow. So the Florida Keys Hawk Watch, insane for peregrine falcons. I saw more peregrine falcons there that day than I have ever in my life. Also, and just like the minutes I spent up just like looking like this, I'm like, what are all these birds? They're like, those are all peregrine falcons. Super cool. This little blob is a super far wood sandpiper. This is me. It's not all happy. That's me getting caught in a rainstorm in Florida. Well, sometimes you're too far away from the car and those rain clouds just come in, I'm drenched right there. And then over there in the corner, that's the same bird. Those are both my pictures of the red-legged thrush. So really, really awesome. There's 2 subspecies of that bird, one in the Cuba and one in the Bahamas. So gives you an idea where they come from. All right, November. I got 9 yearbirds. I went to Rhode Island again. Like I said, a portal opened up in Rhode Island. And I'm not talking like kind of rare birds. I'm talking like insane rare birds. I'm like, I'm going. And then I finally did get my red-billed pigeon. So this is my little map. I didn't make it out west, really. Let's count Texas, but nah, we don't count Texas. This is me, desperate, waiting for those red-billed pigeon. So I'm not kidding. I got them at like the 11th hour. Like I had already spent a whole day, and now I'm on my second day sitting at this along the Rio Grande. I'm peering into Mexico, and these birds are supposed to fly up and down the river. And I'm like waiting, and everyone's like, oh, they come by every day. Of course they do, except for the days I'm there. So I'm waiting. You see, I'm sunburnt. I've been outside for like so long. Like look how red and miserable I am. Anyways, I'm waiting for these pigeons, and when they finally show up, I have never been more excited to see birds in my life. Like that was one of my most exciting moments of the year. That and hookbill kite, those 2 birds. Because I'm not kidding, I'd already gotten into my car to leave, and I got back out, and I like went out, and I was like, I'll just sit here again. I was like, it's like like what's the like the definition of insane person? Just like doing the same thing but expecting different results. I was going insane. I was like, there's no way. I was like, I'm not, more explicits came out of my mouth in those few seconds when these birds landed in this tree than like ever in my whole life. I was so freaking happy. I screaming, like literally, like I wish someone would have filmed it, because like they would have probably been like, that's a crazy person, and they're doing something. So I was like literally like fist waving, screaming, like I was like so excited. So red-billed pigeons, those are the worst pictures of red-billed pigeons, by the way, but I promise those are red-billed pigeons. I didn't just like those aren't just like regular pigeons. All right, those are great pigeons. While I was waiting there, though, I did have the opportunity to see a bobcat, and that's my first bobcat I'd ever seen. There's actually 2 of them, so that's my picture of the bobcat. So that was cool. This is a little screen grab of the common cuckoo in Rhode Island. That's my friend Oscar or Ben. I went a lot of places with Ben and Oscar, 2 younger birders, and they were there to kind of hang out with me and cheer me along. They're always like, hey, there's a rare bird, let's go. So they're my companions for a lot of the trips. But that's common cuckoo, and that is a great bird. Like, cuckoo clock, cuckoo. That's that bird that makes that noise. So that's a really good bird. I think that was like the 2nd or 3rd time ever also in the US, or lower 48 US. It does occur in Alaska from time to time, but lower 48 was a big deal. All right, last month, we're almost done, you guys. You guys can like kind of see where we're going, because we're trickling down, right? December, right? So I wanted to finish strong, and I was chasing rare birds, but there was a couple others that I had to clean up. I had to go back into Saxon Bog. I needed a Corey redpoll, and a couple other birds. So more rare birds, last minute pickups, and like when I say last minute, I mean like on like December like 27th, I was like picking up like Ben Dyer's thrasher, which is like a bird I should have had in January, and I was like only picking up in December because I missed Ben Dyer's thrasher, and I was like, where the hell are they? So, anyways, get my birds. Like I was kind of, it was really scattered. For some reason, I'm back down in the Keys again. Anyways, whatever. And then I finished my year the same way I started my big year, was dipping on a bird. So January 1st, I missed my Antillean palm swift. December 31st, I missed slaty bat gull at Niagara Falls. But my friend Zach was there to cheer me on the whole entire time. Not a birder, by the way. Could care less about birds. And he spent the whole day with me. He was like, you're gonna see this bird. He's like, it's gonna be crazy. So I'm gonna back up. That bird, slaty bat gull, in my head was the record-breaking bird. So I was like, I'm at 723 birds. I was like, if I see this bird, I will be at 724 and I will hold the lower 48 record. No slaty bat gull. Just to think that I was going to get this record and I didn't get it by one bird, I was now tied. I was like kind of gut wrenched, right? So I was like very, very upset. But I was also like, wow, I accomplished and I tied a record, right? So I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. I'm 723, you know, I perked right back up. I saw them. I did it. I went to these places. I did this thing. I took that through a scope, by the way. That's not with a real camera. Yeah, that's the great gray owl. That's a Cuban peewee. This is me enjoying the sunset. That odd little picture on a little wire. That's a juvenile red-footed booby. I was in a national cemetery scoping into the bay in San Diego, and that is a flesh-footed shearwater. So I did one last pelagic in December out of Oregon. Fantastic birding, great time to go out into Oregon and go do some pelagics, but cleaned up nicely, and I ended at 723. You guys are like, what? I thought you guys got the record. I thought that was it. I did not realize. So every summer, bird people get together, ornithologists and researchers and such, and they make all these decisions, right, that affect bird watchers, whether they lump birds or they split them, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, there was a bird that I started off the year that I saw in February when I went to go see that Siberian center called northwestern crow. Now, the authorities will have it that northwestern crow is now considered the same species as American crow, which is the same one we get here in Ohio and we get all over. So on my records, I just thought, oh, well, it's no longer a species. I won't worry about that bird. So northwestern crow, goodbye. I just have American crow. So I get a phone call in February of 21. I'm sitting eating breakfast. My friend Laura Keene calls me. She's an Ohio native, now lives in Texas. She's a fantastic birder and even better photographer. She's really, really good. Anyways, she's also on the committee of the American Birding Association. So she calls me and she goes, hey, I'm looking at these lists submitted for the big years this year. And I'm looking at yours, and you are the only one without northwestern crow on your list. Why? She's like, did you go to the Pacific Northwest? And I was like, oh yeah, saw northwestern crow like in February. And she was like, I was like, but it got lumped. She's like, she's like, her being with the American Birding Association knows all the ins and outs of the rules. She goes, if the bird started on the ABA list at the beginning of the year, it cannot be taken off during your big year. She's like, so you saw a northwestern crow? I was like, yes. She goes, congratulations, you have the new record for the lower 48 big year, 724. So in February, I broke the record. So, boom. Yeah, to say the least, that was another very exciting moment for me. So after I was already settling in for my big year stuff. More December photos, Baird sparrow. This is a hook-bill kite. Lots of times at Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge down in Texas on their hawk tower. People going, the hook-bill kites fly every day. And that's not true. I can confirm because I've been there lots of days and I have not seen it. This day, it was perched up for me very, very nicely. I even had a chance to call Ethan Kistler. I don't know if you guys know who Ethan is, but I knew he was in Santa Ana on the same morning as me. And I said, Ethan, there's a hook-bill kite. And he came running barefoot because he was wearing flip flops and took them off. But anyways, he showed up on the Hawk Tower and he got to share that moment with me. You were there too. Yeah. Alex got to see the kite as well. That's just me on the side of the road in Texas after seeing this Baird sparrow, which is a life bird for me, a bird that I didn't think I was going to see. But when I was looking at this bird, another really rare bird called a spotted rail, somebody told me about where to find these birds. So sometimes birding is just right place, right time, and giving the information. Okay, so I want to talk about the pandemic just a smidgen, not to bring up like bad memories, but I did have a lot of pros and cons. And I hate saying the pandemic had pros, but it really did for me. Some cons, lots of things got canceled, right? So there's pelagics that I wanted to go on that got canceled. There was parks that were closed. There were rare birds that people were like, you cannot come see this. We don't want you here. So there was a lot of things like that did happen. But some pros, flights got really cheap. People were not flying. And they had cancellation policies that got really, really loose. So I was like, oh, maybe I want to go see this rare bird. And then I would book a flight. And then I was like, maybe I want to go see this rare bird. I'll cancel that flight and just go on the other one. And they did not bat an eye at it because they weren't asking questions. So gas was so cheap during 2020. I don't know if anyone remembers gas prices or can think back that far. Those gas prices were very nice. So if you're driving back and forth across the country, it was awesome. And of course, one of the pros of doing a big year during a pandemic is you're outside and you're not around a lot of people. So I did not get sick one time in 2020, not a cold, nothing, no flu and no COVID. Of course, when I got home and started sitting at home all the time, I got COVID, but whatever. There was a lot of people that kind of naysayed, said you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. I took my precautions. I didn't get sick. And there I was, big year record holder. So life after a big year. Take some time to get settled. I just went from birding every single day and traveling every single day to now kind of trying to figure out what I want to do. I ended up moving to Massachusetts because it's beautiful and who doesn't love the North Shore, right, kid? So Alex is from Massachusetts. So she was like, come move here. So I did that. And then I ended up getting a job at the Toledo Zoo, which brings me back here. She works remote. So I was like, let's go to Toledo, Ohio. Yay. So now we're here and we got the job at the zoo. And yeah, that's my life after that's summarized, but life after a pandemic, right? So, and I already explained how I found out I got the record. That's it for the big year talk. All right. So whole year of my life gone, big year record holder. I want to talk a little bit about the zoo. I got like 2 more slides left, and I'll get you guys out of here. So the Toledo Zoo, the conservation here and abroad. So I didn't realize this beforehand, and a lot of people don't realize that the Toledo Zoo does a lot of great conservation work for birds here at home, and the ones that I really were shocked me were the work they do abroad. So there's this gentleman, Joe Wood. This is a great picture of Joe. He is like, he's an employee of the Toledo Zoo, but he works strictly abroad. I think he's been, so he's out there representing our zoo and representing conservation efforts strictly with birds, right? So this is him holding a Necro's bleeding heart dove, and they were able to establish these birds back into the wild, and they're starting to get the populations to grow there in the Philippines. And that's just one example of what Joe does. He will go out in his way and does a lot of great stuff with birds all over the world. Like the tooth-billed pigeon. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this. It's like a bird that's closely related to the dodo bird. Has not been seen in the wild very much, ever. Joe Wood is like the only person I know personally that has seen one in the wild. So pretty amazing. Like sometimes they take infrared stuff out there to try to find these birds. So pretty cool stuff. But there's a lot of great projects like that the Toledo Zoo sponsors and supports, and that Joe Wood works on. He's like the me when I'm here on the home front. He's like the me abroad doing like that kind of conservation work. It's really cool. Here at home, we got things like Project Prairie in Wild Toledo, where we do a lot of work getting like native prairies planted, a lot of like native plants, and a lot of education about that in the conservation department. Hopefully you guys will have someone else talk about that. That would be really great. They could talk your ear off about native plants and ways to really help your even your home yards and stuff like that. So it's great. So, but everyone knows how important prairies are, how important native plants are. The zoo does a lot of work doing that kind of stuff. So, and they put a lot of money into conservation work. So it's great. Me personally, one of my big things I'm working on is collision monitoring, where bird strikes happening downtown. I like to, or I don't like to, but I go out and I go to monitor downtown to see if there's any birds that struck windows and see what we can do. And we're working on a plan to maybe help those buildings in the future to protect these birds. So right now we're just in the monitoring stages, but hopefully we'll have a plan to basically help save birds right here in the home front. So it's a big ongoing project that we're working on, and we're hoping to get other organizations wrapped into it, and it'll be a big old thing that all of the city of Toledo can kind of get behind eventually. Other things I do, I have a bird club at the zoo. It's pretty cool. Does cost $250 to join, which sounds like a lot, but all that money goes strictly straight to bird conservation. So it's like a $250 bird conservation donation, but then you get all sorts of perks, like you get to go on walks with me, you get to hear me talk more, and go on trips and all sorts of other kind of cool stuff. So I have information about the Toledo Zoo Bird Club in the back. Gotta like sell myself. Okay, questions. I'm done. I'll talk more if you guys ask questions, but I don't even know what time it is. How are we doing on time? 8:20. Cool. So we'll take maybe like 5-10 minutes of questions, and then and then would anyone ask any questions on?
So what did you think cost roughly for someone who wants to do a big year? What's kind of?
So it'll vary, right? Because things change in prices, inflation, as we can all see. I spent roughly, I tried to keep it around $1,000 a month. Now I spent more than that. I probably spent closer to like $15,000, maybe even a little bit more, but a rough estimate about $15,000. That was about my limit too. I was about out of money at that point. My most costly things were pelagics. A day pelagics probably cost you like $150. And I did a lot of pelagics. I tried to do as many as possible. Flights were my second most expensive thing. Even though they were cheap, flights are still not cheap, right? So a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there adds up quickly for someone that is not have a lot of money. So one of my things I really would like to do is like write like a how-to book or something like that, or like, you know, how you would do this on a budget. And that is actually something I plan on doing next year and putting out. So, but I think you could reasonably do a big year without breaking the bank for under $20,000.
You didn't do any hitchhiking on this.
I didn't have to do any hitchhiking, thankfully. I owned a car. So yeah, so no hitchhiking for me. A lot. I don't have that car anymore. So it was a lot of miles, man. I'm not kidding. There was days where I would like drive out west and then drive back to Ohio, and then I would just like drive back out west again a couple days later. And like I'm just like you're talking. I don't know how I did it now. Now thinking about it, like I don't even like to drive like 6 hours now. I'm like I can't do it.
Tickets did you get?
That's a good question. So the first time I got pulled over plenty. The first time I got pulled over was, I remember I was in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and a state trooper pulled me over at 10 a.m. in the morning, and he said, "Boy, have you been drinking?" I said, "At 10 a.m.?" And he was like, "Don't be smart." And I was like, "No, I haven't been drinking." I was like, "I'm up here looking for birds." He's like, "It's winter time." And I was like, "I know." I was like, "I'm looking for white-winged crossbills." So I started talking about birds to this guy, and he did not want to listen. And he was so mad. The only reason why he pulled me over is that out-of-state place. That is the only reason why he pulled me over. And then finally, so I asked him, "So why did you pull me over?" He's like, "I think you've been drinking and driving." And I said, "Okay." I was like, "Well, I haven't then." He's like, "Well, let me run your stuff." So he runs my stuff, and then he hands me my stuff back. All right, you get out of here. So that was the first time I got pulled over. I did not get a ticket. I did get a nice long warning sheet in California, because they have a law and they enforce it. Do not be on your cell phone at all. Now that's a law in most states, but most states, you know, if you're using your GPS and direction, that's what I was doing. I don't know where the hell I'm going. I'm like, okay, GPS, I'm looking at my phone, and sure enough, cop pulled me over and said, "Hey, you're on your cell phone." I said, "Of course I was. I don't know where I'm going." And he was like, "No, not California, man." He's like, first one's a warning. He's like, next one's a ticket. And their warnings are warning. I was like, I'm not reading all that. I was like, I'll just take your word for it. I printed it out right there in this little thing, and I got a warning. I got pulled over in Texas, a speed trap. They got me. And I remember I was going, and the speed limit was like 75, and it dropped down to 45 somewhere, and I had no clue. I wasn't even paying attention. And he pulled me over, and so he rolls down his window, and I did not see the speed change, and I'm in a hurry, and I was like, of course, I have a loud mouth. I'm like, "Why'd you pull me over?" And he's like, "What?" He's like, "You were going way too fast." And I was like, I was going 70 in a 75. He's like, "You were going 70 in a 45. And I was like, oh, so yeah. So I got a couple tickets, but that's okay. Yeah, but not as many as I probably could. Luckily, I got more warnings than tickets. So then the Border Patrol harassing me was something else too. Man, the one night when they followed me, I don't mean they were just like following behind me. At one point, they turned on their spotting light on their vehicle and shining it at my car as they were following me. And then he would pull off, and then like he would get to the end, and then another one would pull out right behind him, and they would follow me for another stretch of like 40 miles. It was crazy. And I think because I was along the border, and they were just waiting for me to stop and see what I was up to, but they can't legally pull you over, so not for speeding even. So I was just like, getting harassed by the Border Patrol. But that was about it for the law enforcement. Nothing. Didn't have to spend any nights in the clinker for like staying overnight somewhere I wasn't supposed to. I did get kicked out of some places for sleeping where I wasn't supposed to. Like security would like come and like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Sleeping." And they're like, "You can't sleep here. Like, you gotta go. So but it happens. Is there any online questions? Any more questions? I got stories for everything. I can relate everything back to my big year. So yeah.
I had a question about the conservation work of the division. I know I heard that Black Swamp Bird Observatory was working on the lights out Toledo and Ebird. Wondering if you knew about, were there any I don't know, buildings or organizations like folks that have got on board with the lights?
Yeah. So it's great. So that yes, we actually just had our first meeting with Black Swamp Bird Observatory. It was Metro Parks, Black Swamp Bird Observatory, Ottawa, and the zoo. I won't explain too much because we're still working on things, but we just had our first meeting with all 4 organizations that got together, and we're talking about this. Black Swamp has enrolled a bunch of buildings that are basically will turn off their lights during migration. And now we are working on getting several more buildings downtown to enroll. Right now, there's about a half a dozen-ish buildings, and we hope to really increase that number. We have a whole list of buildings. We're trying to get a hold of building managers and people that own the buildings and stuff like that, and to really bring awareness to this more and more as we go forward. So that's a great question. So the short answer is yes, we are doing that work, and we are hoping to going to make that tenfold and be a much better outlook for everyone. So yeah, that's it. Cool. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.